Welcome to this episode of Street Talk. I'm joined today by one of the newer members of the Urban Violence Research Network, Eduardo Giralt. He's a documentary maker and someone that has carried out a lot of interesting research, really, and kind of on the ground documentation of organized crime, but particularly the guys on the streets. And so we're going to talk to him today about his latest project, a documentary that I've seen that is really excellent, Los Plebes, and find out a little bit more about how Eduardo went about it, why he went about it, and what kind of some of the contributions are that come out of the documentary. So Eduardo, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Professor, thanks for having me here. It's amazing to be able to have this talk with you, and I'm really excited about the level of conversation we're gonna be able to have in relation to this to Los Plebes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about having this network is that we get to, it's not just purely academics, you know, we're mixing lots of different approaches to understanding different challenges around urban violence. And I have to say, I was really pleased that you shared the documentary with us, and I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was quite different to a lot of documentaries that we've seen. Perhaps before we get into talking about the documentary's content, you could just give a little bit of a background about yourself. Like, who are you? What have you been up to? And why did you decide to film this documentary? What was the aim?
Yeah, perfect. So I'm not from Mexico. I was raised in Caracas, Venezuela. I went to school in the U.S. For visual arts, and from there I end up in Mexico, and I wasn't planning on researching and becoming a organized crime geek, right?
Yeah.
But I was working on a film for someone else, and the film was in Sinaloa. I was doing researching and scouting in Sinaloa, and basically I was going to rural communities and interviewing teenagers about their life, and then see if they were interested in participating in this movie. The movie was based on a bank robbery that happened in Sinaloa in the 80s, and that was organized by a team of teenagers. Right now that bank robbery is like a false tale in Sinaloa, so everyone knew about it, and the director wanted to use real teenagers from Sinaloa. And I usually do a lot of field research for other filmmakers when they need to get more facts and details for their script, as well as finding them people who can actually be part of the movie, but who they are not actors, but they actually look like the characters in the script. So anyway, as I was looking for these teenagers and doing interviews, I started to bump with youngsters who work for the cartels, which was something that wasn't surprising because I was in Sinaloa. It's like you start interviewing teenagers in the favelas in Rio, as you know, Professor, and you're gonna end up bumping sooner than later to kids who work for Comando Vermelo, right? It's not that crazy. But what did interest me was that the guys, these youngsters from the cartels, was that they were really interested in the movie because it was about teenage bank robbers, and they were actually wanted to participate. So I was like, all right, man, like, do you want to do a cast? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So we started casting them. They would show up with their guns, their radios, and which I'm gonna send you two videos of those castings, and they were amazing, man. Their creativity, one of them actually brought a map of a real bank and how he would like go about it. Yeah. So we finished that, and at the end the project was canceled. and I couldn't stop thinking about those guys. So I talked to my colleague from Sinaloa with whom I work, and I was like, hey man, we have their access, we have their phone numbers. They were really cool about it, about being filmed. We should actually do a film ourselves. But let's do something real, and let's try to answer a lot of the questions we have and we talk about it. Because with my colleague, he's from Sinaloa, and he's also like a sort of like a narco geek. And you have a lot of dead time while you're waiting for people to show up. So we have a lot of conversations about the cartels, their structures, how they're portrayed in media. So I told him, hey, we should use this to answer a lot of the questions we were asking ourselves. So we find the money to do it. We decided to shoot it on 2 cell phones because it was going to be the less intrusive way for them. And 2 weeks later, we were shooting. We decided that it wasn't going to be about their work, because there's plenty of that. If you put Sinaloa on YouTube, you're going to find more than 30 reports from BBC, Al Jazeera, Vice about the cartel's work. But no one has filmed their bedroom. That's something you never seen. So let's try to shoot their bedroom. And by bedroom, I mean their free time, who they are as teenagers, as millennials. Also, trying to see their relationship with social network, with technology. And that's how we got about it.
And I have to say, I mean, it was the thing that struck me immediately is precisely it's not a sensationalized focus just on, I mean, they do have their weapons there. They talk about the things that are sensational about, some of their involvement in violence, but it's very mundane. It's very day to day. It's, sitting around, chatting, smoking, one of the main guys in the film is a lot about him and his dog that he's looking after. And you exactly as you say, you get a sense of very ordinary teenagers caught up in what seemed to other people extraordinary circumstances, but I suppose to them actually are also very ordinary in a lot of ways. And you get something that I haven't seen in many other documentaries, not just on Mexico, but generally in the kind of genre of looking at organized crime. The very boring parts, the waiting around, the day to day. And I think to some extent, and I don't know what you think, you get a degree of the sadness or the sense of not really going places for some of these main characters. I mean, did you get a sense as the filming developed that you were getting to know how they really felt about things, or did you feel like it was still a performance they were still trying to kind of show off to you?
Well, at the beginning, of course, I think one of the challenges, and I bet you had to face it as well, with your work in Sierra Leone and South Africa and Brazil, is the the their need to meet up their expectation of what a criminal is, of or a gangster, their public mask, right? And they're they wanted to show off. So that's why it was important for us to film in their bedrooms where there was no one else around, and also to use a cell phone because we didn't want it if you use a big camera, people immediately think about a movie, right? And the need to exaggerate is you know is bigger, right? With the cell phone, sometimes they were like, are you actually making a movie? And for them it was, the cell phone is something that is part of their of their daily life, right? Because they're millennials or generation C, whatever, and the camera and the cell phone, they have it all the time with them. So but once you start filming, and once like a week or 2 week has passed, you were able to see their their real skin, to put it in a way, and and actually to have some deeper reflections. And yeah, and actually you have you're able to see them acknowledge the, in a way, the tragedy of their situation, because people underestimate their cognitive capacity, right? Or their self-awareness. They think that they're all the time drug up and high on adrenaline. But as you said, there's a lot of dead time, and there's a lot of thinking about death and life, and the uh, cost and benefit of doing this. And a lot of them are really clear about their position in the structure of the cartel, how low they are, the probabilities that they will end up on the top, right? And also the absurdity of all the war, how meaningless in a way it is, right? So it's there's a lot of depression, and actually that uh, I did end up with the feeling that a lot of the approach you need with this youth is through a mental health thinking, because there's a lot of depression, suicidal thoughts, and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many similarities from just the experience of research that I've conducted, that I've seen with, like you say, that level of self-awareness. We were talking earlier about, to some extent, that the people on the streets, usually guys at the bottom on the streets, they are pawns in this bigger game, and they're the ones that take the risks. But they're self-aware. They know full well they have that agency. They're aware what's happening. I mean, a lot of the guys that I worked with, to some extent, felt trapped, but also they kind of wanted to keep doing what they were doing, and that was always a frustration for family members and that kind of thing. And I think those moments of reflection, you start to see even drug use very differently when you realize a lot of them are essentially self-medicating. They're trying to bury things deep, deep, deep with the use of drugs, and with kind of being, somehow extra social or loud or boisterous, is all trying to bury things. And sometimes I guess also through this kind of exaggerated masculinity as well. I noticed in the entry for the documentary online, it mentioned toxic masculinity. Is that something that you felt comes across in the film, or generally in your interactions with them, that they're trying to live up to certain ideas of what they should be? Or
Yeah, yeah, most def. Although I haven't, it's interesting. I haven't mentioned it that much because that now toxic masculinity has become almost like a cliche, right? It's like everyone is dropping that concept. But it's true that I did have it in mind, but more like machismo, right? That's what for me was always in my head, which is something rooted in Latin America culture, and especially in Mexico, right? With the amount of pop culture that this country has produced in terms of movies, and music, right? The bandidos, right? The rancheros, the revolutionaries. Uh, but also going beyond the pop culture and seeing, in a way, the spiral of violence they have grown up in, domestic violence, right? uh, the violence they saw their fathers inflicting their mother on them, also the violence by the state. So more than toxic masculinity as itself, as it is just a sin by itself, it was just like understanding this but yeah, this cocoon of bravado and and pain they've grown up, right? That has made them basically choose this way in order to survive, because that idea that in order to survive all this amount of challenges, you need to be the toughest one, but also to find like a meaning in all this disaster, and in all like this lack of options and this surplus of abuse of being, I've gone through all of this, but it has made me tougher, right? And now it's payback time. And so by toxic masculinity, I like to see it on this context, right?
I mean, you've already explained to some extent how you got the access, but how were you able to build trust or get permissions to film? It's a good indication that you're aware of that challenge. The way the documentary starts, it actually begins with a car journey where someone kind of, I think, flags you down or flags your colleague down and says, "Hey, why are you filming?" So was that ever a problem for you? I mean, was it kind of permission came from the top and they said, okay, as these are your limits, you can film this, but you can't film that? Or was it more fluid than that? How did you navigate those potential dangers?
So, well, we did have like a security to-do list, because people talk about security protocol, but that sounds like almost like something that is that's never gonna fail, and it's bullshit. Once you're in the ground, it's more like, okay, let's try to follow the steps, and maybe things are not gonna go the worst, right? So we did follow some security steps, and basically, man, it was first try not to act like a spy, right? Like, it's not like you're gonna get there, like, landing in a parachute and then just blend in. That's not gonna happen, man. I remember once in a talk with a photojournalist who had worked a lot in Afghanistan, and he was like, the worst idea is to try to like buy the clothes from the local, right? And pretend you look like them while you're wearing $300 hiking boots. People are gonna know you're not from there. And that's the same here. Like, even if I try to wear a Hugo Boss shirt, right, and a hat with the Sinaloa baseball team, people are gonna find out I'm not from there, and actually it's gonna make them more suspicious. Like, why is he trying to blend in? So that's one thing. Like, don't try to do it undercover. And the second, you find out who controls that part. That's like the research before you go there is fundamental to know whom you're gonna deal with. What type of structure and is there, and also how violent they are, how anarchic they are, how predatory they are. So we did that research. We found out that this place, it was like one of the breeding grounds of Sicarios in Sinaloa, but the guy who controlled that was pretty okay, as long as you didn't intervene or interfere with his business. So once we knew who the players were, we decided, like, okay, how can we have a communication with the boss to see if we can work there. And through a community leader and the wife of someone, we were able to like talk to the boss and have them know what we wanted to do, and they were pretty chill. But at the same time, they were chill because there wasn't any turf war at that moment. There was a peace context, so that was really important. As I was telling you before we started the interview. Nowadays, that would be impossible because there was a inner battle in the Sinaloan cartel, right, between the two families that basically control it. So now that turf where we were filmed, was split, and a lot of the guys would film who at the moment they didn't have any problem between each other. Now they are like enemies. So we were lucky to be able to be there during a peaceful, quote unquote, coexistence. So what we have there, we have to find good subjects to film, because it's not enough for you to just have a member of the cartel who is willing to be interviewed. Because if he doesn't have, the level of sensibility, curiosity, or also in a way the capacity to express yourself with the right words, you're not gonna get anything out of it. Even if he's like a higher up member, or if he has killed more than 50 people. So there's also a casting process going on when you're looking for subjects to interview, right? You need to find someone that, yeah, he's a member of the cartel, but at the same time, he's able to have a level of introspection, right? To understand the question you're asking, and to answer it in the most honest way. So that was also a big part, like meeting cartel members who were the age we were looking for, but who also had the intellectual capacity to answer the questions you were asking.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier when you were talking about the idea of the film and the questions that you had as filmmakers. Did you think, or were you responding to a problem that you saw in the way that people saw Sicarios, or was it just more that people didn't really know this stuff? What was it that you thought needed to be kind of corrected or better understood?
Yeah, most of it. First, with Emmanuel, my colleague, we were saying in a previous conversation that we don't think you can fix the world, whatever that means, through films or any type of artistic expression. But we don't think that you can at least reduce the harm that has been done with other films, right? And basically, it's this like sensationalized approach and a superficial portrait of these guys in two aspects. First, in a glamorized portrait they done of them, where the public actually thinks that every member of a criminal organization lives in luxury, right? And you get there, and a week later you have a castle and a Bengala tiger and a Lamborghini, right? And in our documentary, we show that that's not true. That you see that most of them live in poverty. And actually, you actually see that a lot of them don't have money, or that the payments are late, right? Because there's no way of having digital transaction. Everything is through cash. So that makes it really difficult. At the same time, there's a lot of foul play by the bosses, exploiting their workers like in any other factory. So you understand that the economic incentive is not the main thing that drives them to belong there. And at the same time, you start to question yourself. So if it's not economic incentive, why would they risk their neck, right? Like what's happening with the risk versus reward logic, right? So, and that's something that you don't see explored in most of the film, because you're like, okay, if you're poor and by doing this, you're gonna end up in a jacuzzi full of Dom Perignon every night. Okay, even if you live a short life, in that context, it makes sense. But you don't see that. So then the situation is much more trickier, right? So why would you do it then? And also, so that's for one side. But also the other side, and I think it's the most controversial aspect of our film, is to humanize them, right? To show them as teenagers, as young men, not as like psycho killing machines, right? It's not like an army of, you know, serial killers who do enjoy killing every day nonstop, which is the image that most people have. We wanted to show them their tender side in a way, because that's where you actually can start to ask questions and at least try to find, I'm not gonna say the right answers, but at least the honest ones, right? So for us, that's what's really unique, to make a portrait of them as universal teenagers, millennials, you know, to show them in situations where you could say, hey, he looks like me during my free time, you know, or he could be a teenager in Los Angeles or in London, right? Just like playing a Call of Duty or trying to find a girl to go out on Friday night. Yeah.
I think in one of the bedrooms there's a map on the wall in the background, which I think is the Grand Theft Auto map. And I remember watching it and thinking, I mean, that's often the difference. You know, it's like the only the difference with those guys and guys in many other cities is that they can go and live an element of that lifestyle outside. It becomes extended into their daily lives. But yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying about what your film does in humanizing, and I think it's dehumanizing it. It's reversing that distancing that often happens, particularly with media reporting, but also sometimes with scholarship. I think where things become very sterile. You talk about criminal actors, and you forget that you're dealing with human beings, and certainly from the media's perspective, not monsters. And they're doing monstrous things often. They are doing terrible things, but it becomes more complicated to address once you realize they're not they're not the monsters that might make it easier to accept.
But there's a thing, and I'm pretty sure you have experienced it as well, is that there's a compassion that young actors from conflict zones, let's say in Syria or the Democratic Republic of Congo, enjoy, that young members from a criminal outfits are deprived of, right? So if you see a documentary on young soldiers from the Lord Liberation Army, right? They are referred to as child soldiers, right? Or people who were almost forced to be part of the militia. Which, yeah, I know in a lot of cases they actually go to their villa and they're dragged into, which that happens here also. But a lot of times, you know, the situations that put these young soldiers into militias in the Middle East or in Africa are really similar to the one that pushes a young grunt to be part of any criminal organization. But there's I don't know if it's because there's no idealistic element to it, or nationalistic, or what it is, but people who work for the organized crime or a criminal group or a gang, they don't enjoy that level of empathy or of understanding, you know? Like you hear people talking about how you say the
De-radicalization.
yeah, of youngsters who want to join ISIS, but you don't hear that talk about youngsters who want to go and join a cartel paramilitary wing, right? You,
I think, yeah, you're bang on there as well. I mean, I fully agree with that point that you're making. As you know, I used to do a lot of research with former child soldiers and ex-combatants in Sierra Leone, and there is an interest, there's a general compassion that comes across from international charities, from my young students. You know, they understand that they were victims of circumstance, even the ones that might have volunteered. You know, it was a war situation and it's a terrible thing, and dealing with endemic poverty and a failed government and all of these things. There is a lot of understanding of, even when they've carried out atrocities, that maybe I would have done that in similar circumstances. And then when it comes to crime, especially again, popular reporting, I think you're right, there's so much more stigma, and there's a sense, especially in the communities, in some of the communities that I've worked in, there is a sense of, well, that's their choice. They're bad. They didn't need to do this. I mean, community members will sometimes say that. Why are they doing this? I didn't have to do it. But then you will get those other community members who are far more empathetic and understand that not everyone makes good choices in these kinds of conditions. And I fully agree. I see that, and going back to your point about why do people do this? You know, why do people get involved in gangs or trafficking groups or armed groups if there's a high risk of death, and it's not just about money, and often isn't about money at all. And I see that similarity in both war context and the context that you're looking at for a lot of young people. Gives them a sense of power in a general situation of powerlessness. It gives them a sense of self-respect when they can't find it in other ways, when they're not very good at school or they don't have the family support. Maybe they get the family in that group. So I think your film is really valuable in making those points that you just made, and it does it in a subtle way. It's not like in your face. It comes across really well that these are very human experiences. These aren't monsters. These aren't, kind of reckless youth ruining communities necessarily. But I think that's an uncomfortable message for a lot of people. Have you had the opportunity yet? I know it's early days to have screenings in Mexico. If you had feedback from Mexicans on what they think about this.
So yeah, so we did have some screenings in Mexico. It was just like a 48-hour screening, because of the COVID. It was all done online. It was actually the movie was gonna play for 48 hours, but because so many people saw it the first 8 hours, the opportunity to see it was closed earlier, because I didn't want it to be able to just to have people see it for free for 48 hours. So in a way that it's a sign of success, at the same time, because unwillingly you are part of all this narco culture that has been being fed, right? And that it's really profitable. You don't know what were the intentions of the people who saw it, right? If they wanted to actually, if they thought they were going to see another version of Narcos, right? So I'm pretty sure a lot of people got disappointed. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people think it was boring because they didn't expect to see it. And that makes me happy, right? Like when I read commentaries on Twitter, like nothing happens, so boring. I'm like, yeah, great. Like, actually, you make me proud. I remember Christopher Hitchens saying that some type of enemies should make you proud, where when some type of disappointment should make you proud, right? At the same time, I also have had a critique about me humanizing them, right? Because people they don't, I don't know if they do it out of malice or out of confusion, but they don't understand my motive to do it. And they have this really basic binary logic that if you are humanizing them, then you are attempting
Like
against them.
excusing them almost.
Yeah, so, and also you are like offending the victims, right? It's like there's, and it goes with what we were saying before, is the incapacity to see these guys as victims also, right? Because we were saying, like, why would you join an outfit or a non-violent state actor that non-state actor, sorry, you know, that that basically puts you in harm's way in the worst possible scenarios you can think of, because it's not only getting killed, it's the way you're gonna end up killed if it's not for money, right? So if you understand that, then you see them also as victims of mental health, of dysfunctional families, you know, also of and many other problems. But no, but that type of dialogue or questioning, people don't have it because of the narrative they've been fed, which is they're evil, they're only one victims, which is the people they killed, but they don't actually realize that a lot of the people that they killed are also in this, and that doesn't mean that it's okay, right? Because then there's this expression that you find is like, well, if he got killed, he must have done something wrong, right? And he's like, yeah, but he's still a victim, right?
People, you know, if there wasn't some provocation, it probably mean the film wasn't doing what you wanted it to do, which was challenge that idea. So it's a
But
good thing.
but yeah, but you know what, Milton? But what is like unsettling is that if I, you know, if I had upload a photo of me next to a FARC member, right, or to a Taliban, like even like this, I am pretty sure I wouldn't get the amount of critique that if you post with a member of the Camorra, right, or Comando Vermelo, right, or the Maras. You know, it's really weird how uncomfortable it makes people, especially in a context where the number one entertainment being consumed at Netflix and Amazon is crime thrillers, right? So it's like people enjoy watching and reading all type of uh, artistic work being done about criminals, but they don't enjoy when you get close to them or you feel some type of sympathy or understanding for them. That's like crossing the line. So, you know, I met many people who like love The Wire, love The Godfather, but then they're like, oh, but you're not allowed to do that. Like, what's the difference? Like, you know.
Well, I mean, so I encountered similar challenges. I think most researchers who research sensitive or difficult subjects do, where there will always be some people that believe to try and explain or understand something is to try and excuse it, or to justify it, right? So for me, in my early research, trying to understand atrocities during a civil war, there were criticisms already out there from others who tried that to say, you know, you're rationalizing this evil or you're justifying it. But then there are always voices, including from among families of victims, who are trying to understand. And there's a distinction between empathy before trying to put yourself in someone's position to work out how could you do that, and sympathy or thinking that this is acceptable or somehow justified. But I guess that's always a strange thing as well, isn't it? Of when you do humanize these people and you spend time with them, and you might even grow to like a lot of these people. Like I certainly do with, you know, with a lot of the gang members I've spent time with, like really like them, but they also do terrible things, and that is it's confusing in a way, but I think that's the point. The reality is it's not black and white, it's not binary, it's not good versus evil. And maybe some people would like to divide the real world from entertainment, and Narcos can go on the entertainment side, but the real world you should leave alone. But
Exactly.
I think what you're doing here is asserting the realities that maybe do make people uncomfortable in some ways, including the guy that you filmed who would rather it be more like a Narcos episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. And actually, I did was when I showed him the film, my colleague was like, he was more worried than I was. He was like, man, there's some scenes where he he might think we're portraying him as a loser, right, or a clown. And I was like, well, I don't see it that way. Yeah, there's some scenes that are sad, but I understand what you're saying. That in comparison to the ideal he has of himself in this criminal persona has nothing to do with it. It's like it challenges all his archetype, his criminal ethos is completely destroyed. But well, let's see what happens. And it didn't happen. He just find it boring, and he did enjoy to hear him reflect in deeper issues, right?
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
Now
what you've got.
I
Yeah.
have a question for you. If
Okay, you should go ahead.
um, did you ever felt that you were bending your moral compass too much? Like, do you ever felt confused yourself?
I was about to make a joke about I'm not sure I have a moral compass, but that's I shouldn't say that on the video. Um, no, not really. I think I was always pretty clear. It's not really something that gang members, or when I was dealing with people that commit atrocities, none of them would ever say, well, violence is obviously a good thing, killing people is a good thing. They would all acknowledge that what they'd done, theoretically, isn't a good thing. And they weren't expecting me to, by spending time with them, feel like I was somehow trying to validate their choices. But then there would be situations, usually, talking to, like, I remember a mother in Cape Town breaking down in tears, talking about her son that was, shot and killed. And it was a long time ago, and but she was motivated by that in the community work she was doing. And I can remember in Sierra Leone as well, very similar, heartbreaking, spending an afternoon with someone that had both legs amputated by rebels, talking about the attacks. And coming away, sometimes it's easy, even when you're researching this stuff, to be disconnected. But at those moments, being really uh, very aware of how horrible and horrifying the violence is that the guys that I was spending a lot of my time with had done. But it wasn't a moral problem. It wasn't that I was feeling like it was wrong, or that I was kind of in sympathy with what they did. It was just more confusing because I liked them and they'd done these terrible things. And you're trying to negotiate that thing that is difficult for humans. It's like, how can this person be so charming or quite shy, and yet having carried out, this rape or this murder? But that's part of the explanation, that they're human. So there's something that's within us. There are the possibilities of things that we can do without us having to be monsters. It's not just this small percentage of psychopaths out there that do these bad things. So I
And I
wouldn't
think
say,
yeah, I think it is the same type of critique and hate that Anna Arendt received with Eichmann in Jerusalem, right?
yeah,
Or recently, Jessica Stern, she wrote a book about it wasn't Milosevic, it was the other guy
yeah,
who was involved in the genocide in I don't know if it was Bosnia or Kosovo now, but basically the title was something like my friend the war criminal or something like that,
yeah.
and she got so much hate, and it was painful to see her on Twitter explaining herself, because I could feel, I could relate to her in a way, like, but it's like first of all, there's a lot of crocodile tears outside there, of people who enjoy playing the crying game, right? Like, but at the same time, like, I did understand maybe like some type of guilt. For me, especially 2019 was a year of a lot of action for me. Like, I there was a point where I ended up living 2 weeks, living in a house, in a security house from some narcos in Sonora, and actually it was a really violent outfit. Like, people didn't, they still can't understand how I got access there. Actually, I can still, because it's a part in the desert that is like Mad Max, man. They're like 8 groups trying to control the desert because that's where all the drugs and the migrants go through. So there's a lot of money involved. And because it's a desert, there's almost no government authority. So they can do whatever, man. I'm talking about, tying people to cactus, whatever, man. And I was like 2 weeks in this security house, or this safe house, living with them, sleeping with them. And when I came back, my girlfriend told me, the way I was talking about things, she was like, things are changing with you. Like, you used to have more clear what was good and what was bad, but now I don't know. So I was like, I was taken aback. And that's what I asked you. Well, there's a point when you immerse yourself so much into it, and because we are social animals, and we create empathy towards others, especially if they're helping you. Because in a way, in the same way with you, when you were in Cape Town with those gangs, you're like, what's stopping them from robbing you or from hurting you? So you actually, and why are they helping me if you're not giving them anything in exchange? So you create an empathy, a sympathy for them. So but then, you witness all these things. So, it's really easy to get really confused and dizzy about it.
I think that there's so much research out there on the role of socialization on in groups and out groups, and the way that when you're within a community, could be an armed group, could be a gang, could be an ordinary kind of community, but the values, the sense of what's right and wrong, what you should be proud of, what you should be ashamed of, really shapes you no matter how strong you are as a personality. I found in my research in Sierra Leone, lots of people were turned around by that and did find it difficult in some ways to be as certain about where the boundaries of right and wrong are, or it was easier for them to accept justifications of why it was okay to attack a civilian than to try and do the right thing and go against the flow. I think the kind of peer dynamics are really crucial in all of this stuff that you look at, and generally the fact that we're social animals. We're not these machines. We're not these kind of inhuman monsters. We're very human, and we want to belong, we want to be respected, we want to be part of a group, and we're probably not as always morally assured as our idea of our best selves might be. Eduardo, I think we could talk for hours.
No, yeah,
hours.
Actually, I think it would be best if you and I never met in person. Because that would mean that we're gonna end up like 4 days in a row in a pub talking nonstop. We probably like dehydrate or something. So.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely say we do it in rounds. The drinks are not just on me, otherwise I'll be bankrupt. Thanks so much for taking the time out today. And yeah, again, brilliant, excellent documentary. And I know you're gonna probably do some more stuff with us. Maybe write a blog post. So we'll.
I'm already working on the
excellent.
text.
We've got you working on that already. Great. So yeah, thanks so much. And we will, everyone, I'm sure will be following your work closely and looking forward to seeing the documentary when it's out. Cheers, man.
All right. Take care so much, and thank you so much for this opportunity, bro.